The smell hit them first. Bacon. Real American bacon sizzling on a cast iron skillet the size of a wagon wheel. 180 Japanese women stood frozen at the fence line of a Texas cattle ranch, staring at a cowboy flipping strips of pork with his bare hands like it was the most normal thing in the world. They had been told Americans were barbarians, savages who would torture prisoners and toss their bodies to the hogs. Instead, this man stood there, with his hat tilted back, boots dusty from a morning's work. He looked up from the skillet and said four words that would change everything. "Y'all hungry or what?" What happened next shocked the United States military, transformed enemy soldiers into believers, and proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a gun. It is a plate of bacon and eggs. But before that bacon could touch their lips, something happened that almost destroyed everything. A confrontation that would test whether mercy could survive in the hearts of men who had lost everything to the enemy. That moment came at 4 in the morning 3 days later. First, you need to understand how 180 Japanese prisoners ended up on a Texas cattle ranch in the first place. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The radio announcement crackled through field hospitals and command posts across the Pacific. Soldiers who had been killing each other hours before suddenly stood in strange silence, unsure what happened when wars ended mid-breath. The problem was immediate and massive. Thousands of Japanese prisoners scattered across captured islands. Most were men, but nearly 200 were women. Nurses, radio operators, clerks. The military machine had swept them into service, and now they sat in makeshift camps, waiting to learn if surrender meant survival or something darker. The United States decided to bring them home through Texas, closer to West Coast ports, faster repatriation, better facilities. The official explanation made sense on paper. The real reason was more complicated. Texas had space. Texas had ranches that needed workers after young men shipped overseas. And Texas, for all its rough edges, had something the military brass hoped might be useful in the years ahead. A particular kind of American hospitality that did not ask too many questions about who sat at the table. The Triple H Ranch in Hill Country got the call in late July. 500 acres of rolling grassland, longhorn cattle, and a main house that had weathered 3 generations of drought, depression, and 2 world wars. The owner, a man everyone called Tex Williams, listened to the military liaison explain the situation over whiskey in his study. "You want me to house enemy prisoners?" The liaison shifted in his chair. "We prefer the term displaced persons awaiting repatriation." Tex took a long drink. "I prefer to call things what they are. But yes, I will do it. On one condition." The liaison leaned forward. "My foreman runs the operation, Buck Morrison. Best man I know. He says how things get done, they get done his way." The liaison agreed without hesitation. He should have asked more questions. Buck Morrison was 45 years old that summer, tall and lean in the way of men who spent their lives on horseback. His face was weathered brown from decades under the Texas sun lines, carved deep around his eyes from squinting at horizons. His hands were scarred and calloused, the knuckles permanently swollen from breaking wild horses and mending fence wire in February cold. He had been a cavalry officer in the First War. France, mud and gas and horses screaming in the night. He came home in 1919 with a chest full of medals he kept in a drawer and memories he kept nowhere at all. They simply lived in his body in the way he flinched at backfiring trucks and could not sleep past 4 in the morning. He married Caroline in 1920. She was a school teacher with black hair and a laugh that made him believe the world might be clean again. They had one daughter, Grace. She had her mother's laugh and her father's quiet strength. Caroline died in 1943, pneumonia that turned septic before the antibiotics could reach their small town. Buck held her hand while she drowned in her own lungs, and when it was over, something fundamental shifted in him. Not grief exactly, more like a clarification. Life was short and brutal, and the only thing that mattered was how you treated people while they were still breathing. Grace moved to Dallas for work. Defense contractor. Good pay. She visited when she could, but Buck understood. The young needed to build their own lives. He had the ranch. He had Tex, who was more brother than boss. He had his horses and his morning coffee and the quiet satisfaction of work that left him too tired to dream. When Tex told him about the prisoners, Buck was standing in the kitchen at 4 in the morning, waiting for water to boil. The coffee pot was old tin dented and black with years of campfire smoke. He poured the grounds in by feel not measurement. Outside, the sky was that particular shade of purple that came just before dawn in Texas summer. Cicadas thrummed in waves. Buck listened to the whole explanation without speaking. Then he asked one question. They get treated like people or like prisoners, Tex studied him. What's the difference? People get fed proper. Get work that means something, get respect. Tex nodded, then people it is. Buck poured 2 cups of coffee. No sugar, no cream, just black and strong enough to taste like the earth it came from. One more thing, Buck said. I hear any of the boys mistreating them, they answer to me. I do not care what happened in the Pacific. War's over. These women are guests until they go home. Tex smiled. That is why I want you running this, Buck. You still believe in things. Buck took a long drink. Somebody has to. 6 weeks later, Haruko Yamada was standing in the back of a military transport truck, watching Texas roll past through gaps in the canvas. She was 28 years old, former Imperial Army nurse, trained in Kyoto, deployed to field hospitals across the Pacific Islands as Japan's empire collapsed inward like a dying star. She had seen men die from wounds that would have been treatable with proper supplies. She had held their hands while they cried for mothers who would never know where their sons were buried. She had learned to function on 3 hours of sleep and rice portions that left her ribs visible through her uniform. When the Americans came, she expected execution. Instead, they gave her water. Clean water in a canteen that did not taste like rust or death. The American medic who handed it to her was younger than the boy she had watched die. He looked terrified. She looked terrified. They both drank from the same canteen because neither knew what else to do. The journey from Saipan to Texas took 3 weeks. Shipped to San Francisco, train across the country. Haruko spent most of it in silence watching America pass outside the windows. The sheer size of it was incomprehensible. In Japan, everything was small and contained. Here, the land sprawled endlessly in every direction. Forests gave way to plains, gave way to mountains, gave way to deserts. And through it all, towns and cities that showed no sign of war damage. No rubble, no burned buildings, no craters. America had been fighting a war on 2 fronts for 4 years and looked completely untouched. That realization was more terrifying than any propaganda poster. Now she stood in the truck with 179 other women. All of them silent, all of them trying to prepare for whatever came next. The truck slowed, turned, stopped. The engine cut off. In the sudden silence, Haruko heard a sound she had not heard in years. A rooster crowing, the canvas flap pulled back. Sunlight poured in blinding after the dimness. A man's silhouette appeared backlit and impossible to read. Welcome to the Triple H, he said. His voice was deep and surprisingly gentle. My name is Buck Morrison. I run this ranch. For the next few months, you will live here, work here, and when it is time, you will leave here to go home. While you are here, you follow 3 rules. 1, you work. 2, you respect the animals and the land. 3, you treat others the way you want to be treated. That is it. That is all. He stepped back and gestured to the ladder. Come on down. Breakfast is waiting. Haruko was the first to move. Not because she was brave, but because someone had to go first, and she was tired of waiting for things to happen to her. She climbed down the ladder and found herself standing in a ranch yard that looked like something from a picture book. Wooden buildings painted white with red trim. A barn with its doors open revealing shadows and the warm smell of hay. Horses in a corral, their coats gleaming in the morning sun. Beyond that, rolling hills covered in grass that moved like water in the breeze. And standing in the middle of it all, a massive oak tree with branches thick as a man's torso, casting shade across wooden picnic tables. And on one of those tables, a skillet the size of a wagon wheel piled high with bacon. The smell had been drifting toward them for the last quarter mile. Now standing this close, it was overwhelming. Salt and smoke and pork fat rendering in the heat. Haruko's stomach clenched so hard she thought she might vomit. She had not smelled real meat in 6 months. Buck Morrison stood beside the skillet, a long fork in one hand. He flipped strips of bacon with the casual confidence of a man who had done this 10,000 times. Each piece curled up crispy at the edges, glistening with fat. He piled them on a metal tray stacked like firewood, then cracked 2 dozen eggs into the same skillet. The yolks ran bright orange mixing with the bacon grease. Y'all line up now, he said, voice carrying without shouting. 2 pieces bacon, 2 eggs, biscuit, coffee. That is American breakfast. Get used to it. Nobody moved. 180 women stood in formation, years of military discipline, keeping them frozen despite the smell, despite the hunger, despite everything. They had been trained to refuse enemy food. It might be poisoned. It might be a trick. It might be a test to see who was weak enough to break first. Buck seemed to understand. He speared a piece of bacon with his fork, brought it to his mouth, bit down. The crunch was audible across the yard. He chewed, swallowed, took a sip of coffee from a tin cup. Not poisoned, he said. Just bacon. Best we got. Now come eat before it gets cold. Still nobody moved. Haruko felt something twist in her chest. This was absurd. They were starving. The food was right there, but years of training, years of propaganda, years of fear locked her legs in place. Then she remembered her mother's last words before deployment. Survive, Haruko, however you must. Just survive and come home. She stepped forward. The movement rippled through the group like a stone dropped in still water. Heads turned, eyes widened. But Haruko kept walking until she stood in front of the table looking at Buck Morrison across 3 feet of morning air and a skillet full of bacon. His eyes were gray, tired, kind. He picked up a tin plate and loaded it. 2 strips of bacon, 2 fried eggs, a biscuit that looked like a small boulder, and a tin cup of coffee so black it looked like oil. He held it out. Haruko took it. Her hands shook so badly the eggs slid sideways on the plate. She found a spot under the oak tree and sat on the ground because her legs would not hold her anymore. The bacon was still hot. She picked up a strip with her fingers. No utensils, just her hands and the meat and the morning sun filtering through oak leaves above her. She bit down. The sound was like breaking glass, crisp and sharp and utterly satisfying. Then the taste hit. Salt, fat, smoke from whatever wood they had used. A sweetness she could not identify but later learned was maple. The flavors were so intense, so immediate, so honest, that tears started running down her face before she could stop them. It was not poisoned. It was not a trick. It was just good food cooked by a man who knew how. And for the first time since the war began, Haruko felt human again. Behind her, the line began to move. One woman, then another, then all of them shuffling forward to receive plates from Buck Morrison's calloused hands. He served each one with the same careful attention, making sure the portions were equal, making sure nobody got cold eggs or burnt biscuit. When everyone had food, he filled his own plate and sat on the edge of the table eating with them in comfortable silence. Birds sang, the windmill creaked. Someone laughed just once, startled at the sound of her own voice after months of enforced quiet. A truck appeared on the road trailing dust. It pulled into the yard and a young man jumped out, moving too fast, his face flushed with heat or anger or both. He wore an army uniform with corporal stripes. His eyes swept over the scene and his jaw clenched so tight Haruko could see the muscle jumping. Buck stood slowly, setting his plate aside. The corporal stalked over. "You're feeding them bacon!" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Our boys in the Pacific were eating rats and you are giving them bacon." Buck wiped his hands on his jeans. "War's over, son. These women did not kill your friends." The corporal's face went red. "They are all guilty, every last one of them." His name was Jake Hayes, 24 years old, Purple Heart from Iwo Jima. Lost 3 buddies when a mortar shell landed in their foxhole and turned them into red mist. He had been stateside for 2 months rotating through veteran hospitals, and every night he dreamed about the island. The black sand, the smell of burning flesh, the way his best friend had screamed for his mother while his intestines spilled out onto volcanic rock. Now he was assigned security detail for a POW facility, and the first thing he saw was enemy prisoners eating better than he had in 6 months of combat. Something inside him broke. He grabbed his plate off the table and threw it on the ground. The tin clanged, eggs splattering in the dust. Then he turned and walked away, spine rigid with rage he had no other way to express. Buck watched him go. Tex Williams appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "That is going to be a problem," Tex said quietly. Buck nodded. "I know. You want me to transfer him? No. He needs to be here. Needs to see what happens when you treat enemies like people. Might be the only thing that saves him." Tex studied his foreman for a long moment. "You got more faith in human nature than I do, Buck." "Somebody has to." The first day passed in a blur of activity. The women were shown to bunkhouses, simple wooden structures with cots and thin mattresses, but more space and privacy than any military transport. They were issued work clothes, American denim, that fit poorly but was sturdy and clean. They were given assignments. Haruko was assigned to the ranch infirmary. Buck had recognized something in the way she moved, the way she had instinctively checked on the older women during breakfast. When he asked through a translator if she had medical training, she nodded. He led her to a small building behind the main house. The infirmary was nothing fancy, one room with two cots, a table, cabinets full of supplies. But everything was clean and organized and well-stocked in a way that made Haruko's chest ache. In the field hospitals, they had run out of morphine. They had run out of bandages. They had run out of everything except soldiers who needed them. Here the cabinet was full. Gauze, disinfectant, morphine syringes, antibiotics, more medicine than her entire hospital had seen in the last year of the war. Buck opened an old medical kit, the leather cracked with age. This was mine. First war. France. You know how to use this stuff? Haruko nodded. In Japan, I was nurse, army, hospital. Good. He gestured around the room. Then this is yours too. You help me keep folks healthy. Deal. She met his eyes. Why you trust me? Buck thought about that, because I saw you step forward first this morning. That takes courage. And courage is the same in any language. He pulled a photograph from his pocket. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile standing next to a younger Buck in an old army uniform. Next to her, a little girl with pigtails. My wife, Caroline, he said, died 2 years back. That is Grace, my daughter. She is in Dallas now, working for the war effort. He handed the photo to Haruko. She held it carefully, studying the faces. The woman looked kind. The little girl looked happy. It was a glimpse into a life that existed before everything burned. Why you show me this? She asked. Buck took the photo back, tucked it into his pocket over his heart. Because I want you to know I am a real person. Not a guard, not an enemy, just a man trying to do right by folks. And I figure if I treat you like a real person, maybe we can get through this time without anybody getting hurt. Haruko felt something crack open in her chest. A wall she had built to survive was suddenly too heavy to hold. In Japan, we were told Americans are devils, barbarians. Buck smiled, sad and tired. Yeah, well, we were told the same about you folks. Propaganda is the same everywhere. Makes it easier to kill people when you convince yourself they are not really human. But you do not believe that. No, ma'am. I have killed enough people to know they all bleed the same. And I have seen enough death to know that kindness is harder than cruelty and worth more. A woman appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. She spoke rapid Japanese. Haruko's face changed. Someone is sick, she said to Buck. Older woman, heat, I think. Show me. They ran to the bunkhouse. An older prisoner, maybe 50, lay on her cot, skin flushed and dry. Classic heat exhaustion, maybe heat stroke. Haruko barked orders in Japanese. Buck did not understand the words but recognized command when he heard it. Cold water, Haruko said. Many towels. Elevate legs. Buck moved without question. He grabbed buckets, soaked towels, helped lift the woman's feet onto a folded blanket. Haruko worked with quick efficiency, cooling the woman's skin, checking her pulse, monitoring her breathing. 10 minutes later, the woman's color improved. Her breathing steadied. She opened her eyes. Haruko sat back, wiping sweat from her forehead. She will be okay. Must drink more water. Texas heat very different from island. Buck handed her a canteen. You are a damn fine nurse. Better than some I served with in France. Something in his tone made Haruko look up. He was not flattering her. He was stating a fact. Professional to professional. For the first time since her capture, someone had treated her as an equal. That evening, Tex Williams decided to make a statement. He had watched the morning's tension, seen the way Corporal Hayes stormed off, heard the whispers among the other soldiers. Some agreed with Hayes. Some were uncertain. All of them were watching to see what kind of operation this would be. Tex was a man who believed in leading by example. He slaughtered a cow. By sundown, the smell of wood smoke and roasting beef drifted across every acre of the Triple H. Buck had fired up the barbecue pit at dawn, started a slow cook that would take 8 hours. The meat came off the spit tender enough to fall apart under a fork. Tex piled plates high. Beef brisket, cornbread, coleslaw, beans cooked with bacon fat. He served soldiers and prisoners alike. Same portions, same table. Most of the women had never seen this much meat in their lives. In Japan, during wartime, rationing meant a family of 4 shared one fish. Here, each woman got a portion bigger than her hand. Ken Tanaka was 22 years old, former radio operator. Before the war, she had dreamed of becoming a teacher. Now she sat under the Texas stars with a plate of beef and cornbread and could not quite process that this was real. She bit into the brisket. The meat was so tender it dissolved on her tongue. Smoke and salt and the particular sweetness of meat cooked slow over oak wood. She made a sound that was not quite a soft, not quite a laugh. "This is real?" she asked in broken English. Mama Rosa, the ranch cook, smiled. "Honey, this is Texas. Beef is as common as dirt here." Ken looked down at her plate. "In Japan, we have rice. Small fish. Not this." "Well," Mama Rosa said, settling her considerable weight onto the bench, "that is why you are going to go home and tell everyone what America really is. Not what your government said, what it actually is." Ken nodded slowly, understanding something fundamental shifting in her perception of the world. Across the yard, Corporal Hayes watched the scene with clenched fists. He had not eaten, could not stomach the idea of sharing food with people whose nation had killed his friends. He stood in shadow near the barn, smoking cigarette after cigarette, trying to calm the rage that lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. Buck approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "You planning to stand there all night?" Buck asked. Hayes did not look at him. "How can you do this? Do what? Feed them, treat them like they are human." Buck was quiet for a moment. "Let me ask you something. Those buddies you lost on Iwo Jima, what were their names?" Hayes' jaw worked. "Miller, Rodriguez, Jackson. And if their mothers could see you right now, standing here full of hate, what would they say?" Hayes turned, eyes blazing. "They would say, 'Kill every last one of these animals.'" Buck shook his head. "No, son. They would say, 'Come home.' All the way home. Not just your body, your soul too. And you cannot do that carrying this much hate. It will burn you up from the inside. You do not know anything about it. You are right. I do not know your war, but I know mine. France, 1918. I killed a German boy who could not have been more than 16. Looked just like my nephew back home. I can still see his face when I close my eyes. And you know what I learned? War makes killers out of everybody. But peace gives us a chance to be something else." Hayes took a long drag on his cigarette. "They killed my friends. I know. And nothing I say will bring them back. But look at those women. Really look. Do they look like soldiers to you, or do they look like people who got caught in the same meat grinder as you?" Hayes looked, saw women eating slowly, savoring every bite, saw exhaustion in their faces, saw fear poorly hidden, saw people trying to survey just like he was. It did not fix anything, but it put a hairline crack in the wall of his certainty. That is all Buck was hoping for. 3 weeks can feel like 3 years when the world is rebuilding itself one meal at a time. The Triple H ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal if you did not think too hard about what normal meant anymore. The women woke at dawn, same as the ranch hands. They worked through the morning, heat broke for lunch under the oak tree, worked again until the sun started its slow fall toward the hills. At night, they ate together, soldiers and prisoners, at the same tables, passing cornbread and coffee like they were family who just happened to speak different languages. But underneath the routine tension coiled like a snake in tall grass. Corporal Jake Hayes could not let it go. He was not loud about it. That would have gotten him transferred. Instead, he worked in small ways. A water bucket kicked over after the women had spent an hour filling it from the well. Rakes left where someone would trip over them in the dark. False reports filed with the base commander about minor infractions that never quite held up under scrutiny, but created a paper trail of suspicion. He told himself he was doing it his duty, keeping watch, making sure these enemy prisoners did not get too comfortable. The truth was simpler and harder. He needed someone to hate because hate was easier than grief. Buck saw it happening, chose not to intervene directly. Sometimes a man had to work through his own poison, and interference just drove it deeper. But Buck kept watch, made sure the women knew to come to him if anything happened, made sure Hayes never got them alone. It was an uneasy peace, the kind that feels like holding your breath. Haruko spent her days in the infirmary learning a new kind of medicine. In Japan, scarcity had defined every decision. One bandage had to serve 3 patients. Morphine was saved for the soldiers who might survive. The rest suffered or died quietly. Here, abundance was so absolute it felt obscene. One morning, a ranch hand named Cooper came in with a gashed hand. Fence wire had slipped and opened his palm from thumb to pinky, deep enough to see bone. In Japan, Haruko would have cleaned it with whatever water was available, bandaged it with cloth torn from someone's spare shirt, and hoped infection did not set in. Buck handed her a bottle of iodine, a needle sterile catgut, and enough clean bandages to wrap 10 hands. Use what you need, he said. She cleaned the wound properly, used real antiseptic that stung like fire but killed every germ, stitched it closed with surgical precision, each suture exactly spaced, wrapped it in gauze so white it looked like snow. Cooper watched her work with the quiet attention of men who understood skill when they saw it. When she finished, he flexed his hand, carefully testing the stitches. "Ma'am, that is better work than the doc in town did on my brother last year." Haruko did not understand all the words but caught the respect in his tone. She bowed slightly, the Japanese gesture of acknowledgement. After he left, Buck spoke without looking up from the inventory sheet he was checking. "You could have been a surgeon, I reckon, if the war had not happened." Haruko was washing her hands in the basin. "In Japan, women do not become surgeons." Buck looked up then. "That is a damn shame. You have got the hands for it." It was such a simple statement. Matter of fact, no pity, no condescension, just professional assessment from one medical person to another. Haruko felt something loosen in her chest. "In my country, I am good nurse. Here, maybe I am better." Here or there, Buck said, "You are what you are. The place does not change the skill." That afternoon, Tex Williams found Buck by the horse corral. The older man leaned against the fence, watching the mares graze in the long grass. His face was troubled. "Got a problem," Tex said. Buck waited. "Some of the boys are talking, saying we are treating these women too well, saying it is not right they get beef and clean beds, while our soldiers overseas are still in foxholes." Buck did not look away from the horses. "War is over. Not for everyone. Not in their heads." Buck finally turned. "What do you want me to do? Start treating them worse so folks feel better about their own hate?" Tex sighed. "No, I just want you to be careful. Hayes is not the only one watching. Base commander is getting pressure from veterans groups. They hear about what we are doing here, and some of them are not happy. Let them be unhappy. We are following Geneva Convention. We are treating prisoners humanely. We are doing exactly what we are supposed to do. You are doing more than that, and you know it." Buck was quiet for a long moment. "You remember what you said to me when this started? You said, show them what America really is. Well, this is it. Not the propaganda, not the newsreels, the real thing. Hard work, good food, fair treatment. That is what makes us different from the empires we just beat." Tex smiled despite himself. "You should have been a preacher, Buck." "No, sir. Preachers talk. I would rather just do." The moment that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning when the heat was already shimmering off the ground by 8 o'clock. Buck had made a decision that he knew might get him court-martialed or might change the trajectory of everything they were trying to accomplish. He was betting on the latter. He saddled Daisy, his gentlest mare, 14 years old, steady as a rock, the kind of horse you could trust with your life or your grandmother. He led her to the corral where some of the women were working mending fence posts and clearing brush. Haruko saw him coming, saw the horse. Something in her expression shifted. Not quite hope, but something close to it. Buck stopped at the gate. "Any of you ever ridden before the translator?" A young Nisei soldier named Tom, who had grown up in California, relayed the question. The women looked at each other. A few shook their heads. Most just stared. "Well," Buck said, "today you learn." Tom hesitated. "Sir, is that authorized?" Buck looked at him. "Son, I am going to tell you something my daddy told me. It is easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Now translate that." Tom did. A few women smiled. Haruko stepped forward. She had been watching the horses since they arrived. The way they moved, the power and grace combined. In Japan, horses were rare, expensive, reserved for military and the very wealthy. The idea of riding one was as foreign as flying. Buck opened the gate. "Come on in. Slow and easy. Daisy does not spook, but she can tell if you are nervous. Haruko approached the mare with careful steps. Daisy turned her head, large dark eyes studying this small human with calm intelligence. Haruko reached out slowly, let the horse sniff her hand. The warm breath on her palm made her smile. That is good, Buck said. Now talk to her. Does not matter what language. Horses hear tone, not words. Haruko spoke softly in Japanese. Gentle words, soothing sounds. Daisy's ears flicked forward, listening. Buck showed her how to stroke the horse's neck, how to feel the muscles under the coat, how to move around the animal without startling it. Then he lifted Haruko up onto Daisy's back in one smooth motion. The height made her dizzy. The ground seemed very far away, but the warmth of the animal beneath her, the living, breathing presence, sent something electric through her spine. This was power. Not the power of weapons or armies, but something older. Partnership. Now just sit, Buck said. Feel her breathe. You are part of her now. Daisy took one step. Haruko gripped the mane so hard her knuckles went white. The horse took another step, smooth as water. Buck walked beside them, one hand on the bridle, steady and calm. You are doing fine. Just relax. Let your body move with hers. 3 more steps. Then 4. Then Haruko understood. The rhythm. The partnership. The trust required on both sides. She loosened her grip, let her body sway with the horse's gait. Daisy sensed the change, moved more freely. For the first time in 3 years, Haruko felt something she had forgotten the shape of. Freedom. They circled the corral twice. When Buck helped her down, her legs shook and her heart hammered, but her face held an expression he had not seen on any of the prisoners since they arrived. Pure joy. In Texas, Buck said quietly, when a man teaches you to ride his horse, it means he trusts you. You understand? Haruko looked at him, tears streaming down her face but smiling. In Japan, this would never happen. Enemy would never trust. That is because you are not enemies anymore. You are students, and I am a teacher. That is the American way. The other women had gathered at the fence watching. One by one, Buck lifted them onto Daisy's back. Let each woman feel what it meant to sit on a horse to control 1,000 pounds of muscle with nothing but pressure and voice. Some were terrified. Some laughed. All of them were changed by it. Jake Hayes watched from the barn, smoking a cigarette, his jaw so tight it ached. This was too much. This crossed every line he understood. You did not teach prisoners to ride. You did not give them freedom and joy and moments they would remember the rest of their lives. You kept them contained. You made sure they understood that they had lost. But as he watched Buck patiently guide each woman through her first ride, Hayes felt something crack in his certainty. These women were not warriors. They were clerks and nurses who had been swept into a war machine and spit out the other side. Just like him. Just like everyone. He crushed the cigarette under his boot and walked away before he had to acknowledge what he was feeling. By afternoon, word had reached the base commander. Captain Anderson arrived in a jeep trailing dust, his face set in the expression of a man dealing with problems he did not want but could not ignore. He was 42, career military by the book in every way that mattered. He had read the reports, knew what Buck Morrison was doing at the Triple H, had been content to let it continue as long as it stayed quiet. Teaching prisoners to ride horses was not quiet. He found Buck in the infirmary restocking supplies with Haruko. Anderson did not acknowledge her presence, spoke directly to Buck. Morrison, outside, now. Buck followed him into the yard. Anderson stood with his back to the sun, forcing Buck to squint. Old interrogation trick. Put your subject at a disadvantage. You want to explain to me what the hell you think you are doing? Buck did not flinch. Teaching basic horsemanship. To enemy prisoners. To human beings who will go back to Japan in a few months and tell everyone what Americans are really like. You want them to say we kept them in cages, or that we treated them with dignity? Geneva Convention says we feed them and house them. Does not say anything about riding lessons. Convention says we treat them humanely. Last I checked, learning new skills and being treated with respect is pretty damn humane. Anderson took off his cap, wiped sweat from his forehead. Morrison, I am getting pressure from above. Veterans groups are raising hell. They hear about bacon and beef and now horseback riding. They are asking why we are running a dude ranch for Japs instead of a prison camp. The word hung in the air between them. Buck's expression did not change, but something in his eyes went cold. Do not call them that. Excuse me, I said, do not call them that. They are prisoners of war. They are women. They are people. They are not that word. Anderson stared at him. You are awful protective of the enemy, Sergeant. They are not the enemy. War is over. Now they are just people trying to get home, and we are the people who get to decide what they remember about America. Before Anderson could respond, voices rose from the direction of the bunkhouses. Both men turned. Haruka was running toward them, shouting in Japanese. Tom, the translator, appeared sprinting to catch up. Sir, he called. There has been an incident. They found Corporal Hayes in the women's bunkhouse, going through footlockers. He had already dumped 2 of them clothes and personal items scattered across the floor. His face was flushed movements, jerky with adrenaline and rage. What the hell are you doing, Hayes? The corporal spun around. Inspection, sir. Looking for contraband. This is not your assigned duty station. Someone has to make sure they are not hiding anything. Someone has to actually do their job instead of playing cowboy. Buck's voice cut through. Hayes, step outside. The corporal's hand dropped to his sidearm. Nobody had seen him draw it. Maybe he had not even meant to, but there it was, fingers on the grip. The moment stretched like taffy. Anderson's voice went quiet and deadly. Corporal Hayes, remove your hand from that weapon. Right now, Hayes looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. Slowly he let go, raised both hands, but his eyes stayed on Buck, filled with everything he could not say. Rage and grief and the bone-deep exhaustion of hating people, because hating was the only thing holding him together. Buck did not move, did not reach for any weapon, just stood there calm and steady the way you stood with a spooked horse. Son, Buck said softly, this is not the way. They killed my friends. I know. You do not know anything. You are right. I do not know your war. But I know hate will burn you up faster than any bullet. Hayes's face crumpled. For just a second, the hard shell cracked, and they saw the boy underneath. 24 years old and so tired of being angry. Then the shell came back. He lowered his hands, straightened his spine. Permission to return to quarters, sir. Anderson looked at Buck, some question passing between them. Buck gave the smallest nod. Granted, Anderson said. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. Hayes walked out. His spine was rigid, but his hands shook. After he was gone, Anderson turned to Buck. I should have had you both arrested. Buck was helping Haruko and the other women pick up the scattered belongings. He did not look up, but you did not. No, because you were right about all of it, about what we are trying to do here, about what they will remember. Anderson picked up a small book that had fallen its pages in Japanese characters he could not read. He handed it to Haruko. She took it with both hands, bowing slightly. Keep doing what you are doing, Morrison. But if this blows up, it is my ass on the line. And I will make damn sure it is yours too. Understood. That night, Haruko could not sleep. She lay on her cot in the bunkhouse, listening to the other women breathe in the darkness. The confrontation with Hayes had shaken something loose. They had been living in a bubble here, protected by Buck's authority and Tex's approval. But the outside world was still out there, still full of people who hated them for reasons they could understand but could not change. She rose quietly, found paper and a stub of pencil, sat under the single electric bulb that stayed lit all night, and began to write. The words came slowly at first and faster, in Japanese because English would not carry what she needed to say. She wrote to no one and everyone, to the universe, to whatever God might still be listening. She wrote about bacon tasting like forgiveness, about a cowboy who trusted enemies with his horses, about discovering that the monsters from the propaganda posters were just men trying to figure out how to be decent in a world that rewarded cruelty. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the page was full. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it into the seam of her mattress, where regulations said she should not have anything personal, where she hoped it would stay hidden long enough to matter. What she did not know was that this letter would be found, that it would be read, that it would change the course of everything still to come. But that moment was still 3 days away. For now, she lay back down and closed her eyes. Outside, a coyote called to the moon. The windmill creaked. And somewhere in the darkness, Jake Hayes sat on his bunk, with his head in his hands, trying to remember why he hated these women so much, when all he really wanted was for the war to stop living inside his skull. Morning came too early the way it always did. Buck was up at 4 making coffee in the dark. He heard footsteps outside, turned to see Haruko standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She looked like she had not slept. "You are up early," he said. "Cannot sleep." He poured 2 cups, handed her one. She took it with both hands, let the warmth seep into her palms. They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the window as the sky began its slow shift from black to purple to pink. This was Buck's favorite time, the moment before the world demanded things of you, when you could just exist. "Mr. Buck," Haruko said quietly, "why you do this? Why you kind to us?" Buck thought about that, took a long drink of bitter coffee. "Because somebody has to be, and because every person I am kind to is a person who might be kind to someone else. That is how the world gets better. One person at a time. In Japan, we were told kindness is weakness. Maybe it is. Maybe it takes more strength to be cruel. But I would rather be weak and decent than strong and empty." Haruko smiled, sad and knowing. "You are not weak." "No, ma'am, just tired, and trying to do one good thing before I am too old to make a difference." The sun broke over the hills, flooding the kitchen with gold light. Another day beginning, another chance to prove that mercy was stronger than hate. They did not know it yet, but they had less than 72 hours before everything would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. The inspection came without warning on a Thursday morning that smelled like rain. Captain Anderson arrived with 2 military police officers and a directive from Regional Command. "Standard procedure," he explained, though his eyes told Buck this was anything but standard. Someone higher up the chain had gotten nervous. Someone wanted proof that the Triple H was running a proper POW facility and not as the veterans groups were claiming a vacation resort for the enemy. All personal items subject to search. All correspondence reviewed. All protocols verified against Geneva Convention standards. Buck stood in the yard, arms crossed, watching the MPs go through the bunkhouses. He knew what they would find. Knew what Haruko had been writing late at night when she thought no one was watching. Knew it would either save everything they had built here or destroy it completely. The first MP emerged from the women's bunkhouse carrying a small stack of papers, letters, drawings, a pressed flower someone had saved from the garden, and folded carefully hidden in the seam of a mattress, Haruko's letter. Anderson took it, unfolded it carefully. His face was unreadable as he scanned the Japanese characters. He looked at Tom, the translator. "What does it say?" Tom read it slowly, translating as he went. His voice changed as he spoke. Got quieter, more careful, like he was handling something fragile. "To whoever reads this, I am Haruko Yamada, former Imperial Army nurse. I was taught Americans are devils. I was wrong." He paused, looking up at Anderson. "Sir, should I continue all of it?" Tom kept reading. The letter detailed everything. The bacon breakfast, the medical supplies, Buck teaching her to ride Daisy. The moment she realized that abundance created generosity, not the other way around. And then the part that mattered most. These men did not violate your rules. They honored something greater. Your nation's values. If American values mean anything, they mean treating even enemies as human beings capable of redemption. Please let us stay and work. We will earn our keep. We will prove worthy of the mercy shown to us." The yard was silent, except for the wind moving through the oak leaves. Anderson folded the letter, slipped it into his pocket. "Morrison, with me." They walked to the ranch house out of earshot. Anderson leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the land. "You know what is going to happen when I send this up the chain?" Buck waited. "Either I get court-martialed for letting you run this place like a summer camp, or this becomes the model for every POW facility in the country. There is no middle ground. Then I guess you better decide what kind of officer you want to be." Anderson laughed, sharp and bitter. "You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. Do what is right or do what is convenient." Anderson was quiet for a long time. Finally, he pulled out the letter, looked at it again. This woman, Haruko, she wrote this knowing it could get her punished, knowing it could make things harder for everyone here. She wrote it because she wanted to protect us, wanted to make sure if this all went to hell, people understood we were just trying to do right. That is loyalty to an enemy captor. Buck shook his head. Not enemy, not captor, just to someone who treated her like a person. Anderson put the letter back in his pocket. I am sending this to Washington, along with my report, along with my recommendation that the Triple H program be expanded. And Morrison, if this blows up in my face, I am taking you down with me. Fair enough. But Anderson was smiling now, tired and real. You crazy son of a bitch. You might actually pull this off. 3 days later, the story broke. Not the way anyone expected. Not through official military channels or press releases. Through a secretary at Regional Command who mentioned the letter to her husband who worked at the San Antonio Express. Through a junior reporter who saw a human interest story that might break through the endless stream of war tribunals and occupation politics. The headline ran on page 3, Japanese POW defends American cowboy in letter. Below it, excerpts from Haruko's letter translated into English, printed in the same newspaper that had run recruitment ads and war bond drives for 4 years. By the weekend, the Associated Press picked it up. Buck first learned about it when Tex showed him the newspaper over breakfast. The old rancher was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Well, hell, Buck, you are famous. Buck read the article twice, saw his name in print, saw quotes from Haruko's letter that made his chest tight, saw the final paragraph that changed everything. Military sources indicate the Triple H Ranch program will now serve as a model for humane POW treatment, with plans to implement similar protocols at facilities nationwide. When asked for comment, a Pentagon spokesman stated, "This is precisely the image America wishes to project as we rebuild relationships with former adversaries." Buck set the paper down, pushed his eggs around his plate, did not feel much like eating. "You okay?" Tex asked. "Just thinking about Hayes, about all the boys who are going to read this and think we betrayed them somehow." Tex poured more coffee. "You cannot save everyone, Buck. Some men are going to carry the war inside them forever. But you gave Hayes a chance to see something different. What he does with that is on him." 200 miles north, Jake Hayes sat in a VA hospital in Austin reading the same article. His hands shook. Not from rage this time, from something more complicated. He had been transferred after the incident. Mandatory psych evaluation. The doctors kept asking him questions about rage and grief and survival, kept trying to get him to talk about Iwo Jima, about watching his friends die, about why he hated so much. He did not have answers, just memories that played on loop every time he closed his eyes. But now, reading Haruko's words, something shifted. These men did not violate your rules. They honored something greater. He thought about Buck standing calm while he had his hand on his weapon. Thought about the way the old cowboy never raised his voice, never threatened, just kept showing up every day trying to do right by people. Thought about Ken in the garden, showing him a photo of her dead brothers. War killed them. War is enemy. Not you, not me. Hayes folded the newspaper carefully. Put it in the drawer beside his bed next to the photos of Miller and Rodriguez and Jackson. 3 friends who would never get old, never get the chance to figure out who they were without the war defining them. But Hayes was still alive, still had time to become something other than hate in human form. He asked the nurse for paper and a pen, started writing a letter he did not know if he would ever send. December came to Texas with cold mornings and skies so blue they hurt to look at. The repatriation orders arrived on the 10th. 180 women would board trains for San Francisco on January 3rd. From there, ships to Japan. Home. Whatever that meant for a country in ruins. The women received the news in silence. Should have been joy. Should have been relief. Instead, they felt the strange grief of leaving a place that had rebuilt them after everything else had torn them down. Haruko stood in the infirmary organizing supplies one last time, making sure everything was labeled, making sure whoever came after her would know where to find things. Buck watched from the doorway. "You do not have to do all that. I know, but I want to leave it right." He stepped inside, handed her a small leather satchel. "Been meaning to give you this." She opened it slowly. Inside, a medical textbook in English. A nurse's kit with scissors and bandages and a stethoscope that looked old but well-maintained. An envelope with $50 in bills. And a letter handwritten in English with Japanese translation below. To whom it may concern. The bearer of this letter, Miss Haruko Yamada, is a skilled and compassionate nurse. She has demonstrated exceptional medical knowledge and dedication to patient care. I recommend her without reservation for any position in the medical field. Signed, Buck Morrison, former medical corpsman, U.S. Army. Haruko's hand shook. This is too much. No, ma'am, it is what you earn. You are going home to a country that needs rebuilding, needs people who know how to heal. That $50 is for when you start your clinic. And you will start a clinic, right? She looked up at him, tears running free now. How you know? Because I know you, and I know that what you learned here you are going to take home and plant like seeds. Maybe they will grow into something good. She set the bag down carefully. Bowed deep, the formal Japanese bow reserved for masters and fathers. When she straightened, Buck offered his hand. She took it. They shook like equals. Thank you, she said, for showing me America is not devil. America is hope. Buck's voice was rough. You take care of yourself, Miss Harry. Build that clinic. Help your people. Show them what you learned here. I will. Because of you. That night, Tex organized one last feast. He had been planning it for weeks. Killed two of his best steers, started the fire before dawn. By sunset, the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat filled every corner of the ranch. Turkey ham, mashed potatoes, gravy cornbread, green beans cooked with bacon, apple pie that Mama Rosa had been working on for 2 days. A spread that would have fed twice their number. Tex believed in excess when it came to goodbyes. The women sat at long tables under strings of lights that Tex had strung from the oak tree to the barn. Soldiers and prisoners side by side. No more separation. No more careful distances. Just people sharing a meal on a cold December night. Buck brought out his guitar. He had not played in years, not since Caroline died. But tonight felt important enough to break that silence. He tuned it slowly, the old strings protesting, then started playing Home on the Range. His voice was rough but true. The melody carried across the yard, simple and home and full of longing for places that maybe never existed except in songs. The women did not understand all the words, but they understood the feeling. Home, belonging, the ache of knowing you are leaving something precious behind. When Buck finished, Ken stood up. She was shaking but determined. She started singing a Japanese folk song, Sakura, cherry blossoms, a melody about beauty and impermanence, and things that bloom briefly before falling. Her voice was small but perfect, every note clear and clean as creek water. When she finished, there was silence. Then Tex started clapping, slow and steady. Others joined until the whole yard rang with applause. Ken sat down, crying and laughing at the same time. Mama Rosa put an arm around her shoulders, pulled her close. You got a beautiful voice, honey. Do not ever let anyone tell you different. Christmas Eve fell on a Sunday. Buck spent the morning in the infirmary, with Haruko going over supplies one more time. Both of them knew it was just an excuse to spend time together before the end. I have something for you too, Haruko said. She pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. Inside a photo. The women of the Triple H, all 180 of them, standing in front of the barn. Someone had borrowed a camera from the base. They had posed in their work clothes, sun on their faces, looking directly at the lens without fear. On the back, written in careful English, to Buck Morrison, the teacher who showed us what America means. We will never forget. Below that, 180 signatures in Japanese and English, both. Buck held it like it might dissolve. This is the finest thing anyone ever gave me. We wanted you to remember us. His voice broke. I could not forget you if I tried. The morning of January 3rd came cold and clear. The buses arrived at 6 engines, idling, exhaust hanging in the frozen air like ghosts. The women lined up with their few belongings. Each one had been issued a travel pack, food for the journey, a blanket, documentation for repatriation, and tucked inside each pack a letter from Buck Morrison to Japanese authorities explaining in careful detail what these women had done, how hard they had worked, how much they had learned. Please treat them with the same dignity they showed us, he had written. They are returning as ambassadors of a better future. One by one they boarded. Some looked back, some did not. All of them carried something invisible and precious. A memory of kindness when they had expected only cruelty. Haruko was last. She stood at the bus door, one foot on the step. Turned back. Buck stood there with his hat in his hands, trying not to let her see the tears in his old cowboy eyes. Mr. Buck, I will never forget. I will tell my children. I will tell their children. I will tell everyone. America is not devil. America is hope. She bowed deep one final time. Buck tipped his hat. You ride careful now, Miss Harry, and when you get home, you build that clinic. I will. A pause, her voice catching. Because of you. The bus pulled away. Dust rose in its wake. Buck watched until it disappeared over the hill, until there was nothing left but empty road and the sound of the wind through winter grass. Tex walked up beside him, put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, Buck. Buck put his hat back on. Just did what was right. Any decent man would have done the same. That is where you are wrong, friend. Not every man, but every good man. And that is what America is supposed to be. Years passed the way they do. One season bleeding into the next until you looked up and realized decades had gone by while you were just trying to live right. Buck kept ranching, got older. The arthritis that had been threatening for years finally settled into his joints, making mornings hard. He could not ride as much, could not work like he used to. But he still woke at 4, still made his coffee in the old tin pot, still watched the sun come up over land he had loved his whole life. Tex died in '63, cancer, fast and mean. Buck stood at the funeral in his Sunday suit and said a few words about loyalty and friendship and men who knew how to live with honor. Then he went home and played his guitar for the first time since Tex was buried. Played Home on the Range and cried like he had not cried since Caroline died. The ranch got smaller, sold off parcels to pay taxes and medical bills. But Buck held on to the core. The house, the barn, the corral where he had taught 180 women what freedom felt like. Grace visited when she could, brought her kids. Buck's grandchildren ran through the same yard where prisoners had once worked. He told them stories they were too young to understand but old enough to remember. Stories about choosing kindness when hate was easier. The letters came regularly from Japan. Not often, once or twice a year, but steady as seasons. Haruko wrote about rebuilding Hiroshima, about starting a small clinic with Buck's medical kit and his $50, about marrying a school teacher, about having 2 children, about teaching young nurses that American way meant clean and organized and kind always. She sent photos, her clinic growing from 1 room to 3 to a full hospital, her children, her grandchildren. Every image proof that seeds planted in Texas soil could bloom halfway around the world. In '65, Grace went to Japan on business, tech company expanding into Asian markets. She was 40 now, successful and confident. She arranged to visit Hiroshima to meet the woman her father talked about with such reverence. Haruko was 68, still working 3 days a week at the hospital she had built, still teaching, still carrying Buck's recommendation letter in a frame on her office wall. When Grace walked into that office, Haruko stood slowly studying this woman's face. Then she started crying. You look like your father. They spent 3 days together. Grace learned about bacon that tasted like forgiveness, about a horse named Daisy, about the moment fear became trust, about what it meant to be seen as human when everyone said you were enemy. On the last day, Haruko handed Grace a package. For Buck. Tell him I kept my promise. Grace brought it home to Texas, found her father on the porch, arthritis so bad now he could barely hold his coffee cup. She sat beside him and opened the package together. Inside, Buck's old cowboy hat, the one he had let Haruko wear that day on Daisy. She had kept it all these years. A photograph of Buck on horseback dated 1945. On the back, in English and Japanese both, to the teacher who showed me freedom. And a letter. Dear Buck, I am 68 now. My hands shake. My eyes are weak. But my memory is perfect for what matters. I built the clinic like you said. It became a hospital. We have helped thousands, trained hundreds of nurses. I teach them your way, clean, organized, kind always. My son is a doctor. My daughter is a teacher. My grandchildren will never know war. That is because of seeds you planted. I want you to know that teaching us was not small thing. It was everything. You showed enemy that America is not what we were told. You showed us that mercy is not weakness, that kindness creates more kindness. If you see Hayes's name anywhere, tell him I forgive him. War made him that way. Peace can unmake it. Keep riding, Mr. Buck, even if it is just in your heart. Your student always, Harry. Buck held the letter with shaking hands. Read it twice, then he put on his old hat, felt the shape of it settle onto his white hair, like coming home. Grace, he said quietly, this is the most important thing I ever did. More than the war, more than ranching, more than anything. Because I showed them America and they took it home. They planted it in Japanese soil, and it grew. He died in 78, quiet in his sleep at 80. The funeral was small, ranch folks and some veterans. Grace spoke about her father's belief that kindness was harder than cruelty and worth more. Haruko could not travel, too old, too frail, but she sent a recording. Her voice in English, now accented but clear. Buck Morrison showed me that America is not a place. It is an idea. The idea that every person deserves a chance at redemption. That kindness is strength, not weakness. That feeding your enemy is not surrender. It is victory over hate itself. Grace played it twice. Once at the funeral, once at home alone crying for the father who had taught her that the measure of a man was not what he took from the world, but what he left behind. The years kept moving. Grace got old. Haruko got older. In 2003, both women were still alive, still exchanging letters, still carrying the memory of one summer in Texas when the world learned how to choose mercy. In 2015, Haruko's granddaughter visited the Triple H. It was a museum now, Texas historical landmark. The barn was preserved, the corral where lessons happened, the kitchen where bacon had changed everything. She met Buck's great-grandson. He was running the ranch, smaller now, but still working. They stood together, looking at photographs on the museum wall. Buck and Haruko, young and old, enemy and friend, teacher and student. The Japanese media covered it. The cowboy and the nurse, 70 years later. Today, Buck Morrison's hat sits in Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. Next to it, Haruko's medical bag from 1945. Two artifacts from opposite sides of a war united by one truth. America won the war with bombs. But it won the peace with bacon, coffee, and a cowboy who believed in the goodness of his enemy. That is the America worth fighting for. Not because we are perfect, but because when given the choice between cruelty and compassion, between revenge and redemption, we choose the harder path. We choose to be better. And that is what makes us American. If this story moved you, share it. Share it with veterans. Share it with young people who need to understand what America means. Share it with anyone who has forgotten that kindness is the most powerful weapon we have. Because stories like this are not just history, they are instructions for how to live. In a small museum in Texas, visitors stop to read the plaques, to see the photographs, to understand what happened here. Children ask their parents what it means. The parents try to explain. It means even in the darkest times, people can choose to be good. The sun sets over the Triple H Ranch the same way it did in 1945. The windmill still creaks. The grass still moves like water in the wind. And somewhere in the air, if you listen close, you can almost hear the sound of a guitar playing Home on the Range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Buck Morrison believed in that America, the one in the song, the one that existed not in any real place, but in the choices people made when nobody was watching. He lived it, he taught it, and he left it behind for anyone willing to learn. That legacy lives on, in hospitals built by former enemies, in grandchildren taught to choose kindness, in every person who hears this story and decides that maybe, just maybe, the world can still be good if we are willing to make it so. One person at a time, one meal at a time, one act of mercy at a time. That is how the world gets better. That is the American way. God bless Buck Morrison. God bless Haruko Yamada. God bless every cowboy and every nurse and every person who still believes in doing the right thing. And God bless America, the idea worth fighting for. The flag still flies over the Triple H Museum, red, white, and blue against Texas sky. And every day people come to remember, to learn, to believe again. That mercy outlasts victory. That kindness defeats hate. That one man with a skillet and a gentle horse can change the world. This is not just history. This is who we are meant to be. End.